Congresswoman's campaign manager. Let's see, is that Mayor Pete?
Hello, how are you doing?
You going, Mayor, and then Congresswoman?
Hi, Mayor Pete. Hello, everyone.
Hello, how are you? Nice
Hi,
to see
Mayor.
you.
Great. So I think we can go and get started. Let's see, Congresswoman, would you like to go ahead and kick us off?
I will. Thank you so much. And Mayor Pete, I'm so glad you're with us today.
Same here. So glad to be reconnected.
Absolutely. Thank you. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. My name is Lucy McBath, and I am the Congresswoman for Georgia's 6th Congressional District. Before we get started, I want to thank every single one of you that are on this call, on this event this evening. And I know we had to reschedule this event due to some last-minute votes that I had to take in the House the last time. But thank you so much for taking a few moments of your time to join us again. I really, really appreciate you being invested in me enough to come and hear my heart and to spend this good time with Mayor Pete and myself. I'm so happy that Mayor Pete has been so flexible with his time and that he's been able to make this event happen for us. And I'm so excited to announce that we have had thousands of signups. If you saw this on social media, email, or you were told about this event by a friend, we're so honored that you were able to join us today. So whether you supported my campaign, recruited people to this event, or you're just joining to learn more about who I am and hearing from Mayor Pete, thank you from the bottom of my heart. I truly appreciate it. And of course, a very special thank you to Mayor Pete. I have closely followed your career for some time now, and I'm so proud to say really that I'm a big fan of yours. I've always been a big fan of yours. And you've been a tremendous advocate and supporter, and I'm so happy to be on this call with you. At this time, Mayor Pete, would you like to say a few words before we get started?
Yes, just a quick hello. First of all, thank you for everything that you were doing. Thanks for your service to the country, for the way that you are representing those you serve. Thank you for taking your own experiences, including experiences with tragedy and violence and health challenges, and allowing those to shape legislation that's going to make others' lives better. And we know that you were shaping legislation last time we came together, so we were all of course, understanding that you were doing the people's work, voting on and shaping legislation late into the night, and so glad we were able to find another time to come together. I want to thank everybody who's on this call for joining me and supporting Congresswoman Lucy McBath, whether you have been with her from the get-go or whether you've just learned recently about her story, her service, and above all, the urgency of making sure that she prevails and returns to the United States Congress, because the years ahead are going to require exactly the kind of leadership that she so uniquely brings to the U.S. House. Yes, this is one of the races where we have the most at stake, one of the tightest races involving a member of Congress of color, and one of the tightest races involving our ability to hold on to the Democratic majority. But it's more than that. Someone with the mix of drive and compassion and intellect that you will hear in a few moments, if you don't already know about it, that Congresswoman McBath brings, is what we're going to need in order to shape the years ahead. I'm convinced that the next president and the next Congress are going to be confronted with challenges the likes of which we haven't seen at least since the FDR era. And that means the choices they make, even day-to-day, month-to-month choices that they make, those are going to be the groundwork for what this whole next decade and therefore the balance of this century are going to look like. So it couldn't be more important. I know that you know that. I also see a lot of Win the Era and Pete for America faithful who have so generously joined us for several of the events backing the candidates that we think belong at the top of that list of people that you're supporting. So I want to thank you for all the time and treasure that you've offered too. So with that, Congresswoman, back to you.
Well, thank you. Well, Mayor Pete, do you mind just kind of telling us a little bit about what you've been doing lately?
Yeah, so I think like a lot of us, I'm finding just how busy you can get without leaving four walls. I don't go very far, other than walking the dog with Chasten to the end of the block and back, and yet it feels like the days are going by incredibly quickly. I think all of us recognize we've got to do everything that we can between now and the November election to make sure that that election goes well. This is part of that right now. So are the other candidates that we're backing with Win the Era. So is my work with the Biden campaign. And I've been particularly pleased to see a number of alumni of the Peep for America staff who've been announced in recent days and weeks, playing key roles on the Biden team going forward, because that race is so important. I think that campaigning obviously has changed, but it's changed in particular for those who are supporting the candidates. If you think about it, candidates have been doing the hard work that you do, yes, in a different way, but doing the same things that you would be doing out on the stump as circumstances allow. You are engaging on policy, connecting with advocacy groups, motivating supporters, raising money, talking to media. Candidates, I think, have had a very clear path in terms of what to do. It's on the rest of us who are backing those candidates to get busy and find ways to do it in this kind of Zoomosphere instead of the ways that we're used to doing it, like throwing open the office of a campaign, going through the door and finding your way to a seat and picking up a call packet and helping out. So we're all getting used to that together, but I'm certainly getting used to that with everybody else. And that's why we created Win the Era, to make sure that we're supporting those candidates like you, who are going to be so important to our future. And it's not just about the White House. Again, you will see me every day doing something to make sure we win this White House. But more than ever, we're being reminded that offices besides the presidency really shape our future and shape this moment. I also think this is a time for us to be very wary of complacency. If the polls are right, if the election's today, we'll be in great shape. But there are two things we got to think about. First of all, the mechanics of the elections themselves. The elections are hard to run. We saw this, a lot of concerns around this in Georgia. And I know that you're uniquely able to speak to that. We saw it in Wisconsin. We have got to make sure that we do everything to support efficient and fair elections that in particular do not disproportionately disenfranchise voters of color. And there's some very specific things that need to happen to make that so. Universal access to voting by mail, but not only voting by mail, making sure there are safe ways to vote in person for people who are in states where voting by mail is relatively new, so that nobody is disproportionately harmed by the circumstances. So that's one thing we got to be on the lookout for. The other thing is just to remember how much can change. Look how much has changed in the 4 months or so since I stepped off the campaign trail running for president. And that's a reminder that in the 4 months or so that are left between now and election day, these kinds of world historical shocks like we're living through don't usually come one at a time. There's probably more. Over and above the pandemic that has radically changed life in this country, in addition to the outpouring of anguish in this country after the murder of George Floyd and the national reckoning that we're having over systemic racism, and the conversation not just about how to beat back the most virulent and naked and self-consciously racist voices that are out there, but also how white progressives might be more mixed up in a system and a structure that entails racism than we might like to consider, and what we can do about that right now. All of these things are going on, but there will be more on top of that. We don't know what. Maybe a national security event, maybe a natural disaster, maybe something this president will do to try to shake up the dynamics in this country. But whatever it is, we should be ready. And that's one of the reasons why we're doing this groundwork right now. It's also why Win the Era is not just backing candidates we believe in. We also have a 501c4 organization, the Win the Era Action Fund, that is actively teaming up with and amplifying organizations like Fair Fight doing the work to make sure that the elections are fair. Teaming up with organizations like the Leadership Conference on Civil Rights, doing whatever we can to make sure that that message is heard. Even just on social media, trying to amplify the work of groups like Color of Change and others, trying to deliver racial justice in our time, because we know that this work is going to extend through years and even decades. So that's been keeping us pretty busy here, but also trying to just enjoy being home. These aren't the circumstances we would have asked for, but there's a lot of virtue in being home when you've been on the campaign trail for a year and a half. Chasten has a roast going in the crock pot right now. He has perfected his cooking skills. I've perfected my dishwashing skills. And the dogs are, I'm not sure they're ready for what's going to happen when we're finally not confined to the house most of the time. But we're doing what we can to take care of ourselves, and also working on other projects. Chasten's got a book coming out in September that I'm really excited for America to see, because his story in its own right is extraordinary. And I've got a book coming out on the subject of trust, something we might discuss in this hour too, knowing that trust in our institutions, even trust in each other among Americans, is dangerously low. And we're going to need a high level of trust. As a matter of fact, high trust societies and countries right now are doing better when it comes to dealing with the pandemic. They're going to do better when it comes to dealing with climate change. We need to build a new baseline of trust in this country. And so I've been doing a lot of thinking and writing and talking to people about what it might take for that to happen, and hope that the book coming out in October will touch off some conversations about what we need to think about going into November and beyond. So that's keeping our small but mighty team and our small but mighty household busy. And we're finding it's different from running for president, but there's more work to be done than ever.
Well, Mayor Pete, once again, thank you so much for letting us know what you've been up to. And thank you once again for joining us. And, you know, I seem to say this at every single event that we do, but I really see all of my supporters as one big family. Most particularly in a climate like this, we have to act as if we are united, collaborating together. And I really see every event, people that come to hear my heart and to invest in me. I see us all as one big family. I could not be more grateful to each and every one of you that have joined us tonight. And none of the work that I'm doing in DC or that Mayor Pete has been able to accomplish, continues to do across the country, is really possible without the support and dedication of our grassroots organizations and supporters like yourselves. Everyone on this call knows that the time for us to stand together is absolutely and unequivocally now. We must stand together. Our nation is facing the most troubling times that I think we've ever seen in our recent history. I am actually 60 years old, so I've been around for a while. And in my lifetime, I've never seen the kind of anxiousness and the worriedness and just the people are just so unsure about the future, and we have every right to be. But the last few weeks have really exposed the deepest wounds of our nation. I've watched headline after headline after headline on my television screen, and I'm just gravely reminded of the deep, trauma that I was caused by losing my own child to the very same kind of murder, due to the same kinds of bigotry and hatred that we've seen in our country over the last few months. And listing off the names of all the young Black people that we've lost too soon has now become very commonplace in the country. And I'm sad to say it's very commonplace. When I talk to people that are gun safety advocates, and, it's gotten to the point where, there have been so many horrible tragedies that you have to say, well, which one is that one? And what year did that happen? And this cannot be our new normal. And it's a painful reminder to the hole that has been left in my heart ever since my son Jordan was murdered in Jacksonville, Florida. And that's almost 8 years ago. I am like so many grieving mothers and fathers in America, that I lost my child for reasons that are completely far out of my own control. And my father played a very leading role in the civil rights movement of the 1950s, 60s, and 70s. And he even marched along with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in the March on Washington. And I always say I was the child that was in the stroller at the March on Washington, even though I didn't understand what was happening. But those kinds of experiences have had profound meaning in my life. And it often feels like, we are disturbingly now slipping back into that time. I was a baby when John Lewis and Dr. King marched on Washington. I was in the stroller. But today I have the profound pleasure of being able, and also just, I feel so grateful to be able to serve alongside Congressman Lewis in the House, fighting for the same gains and fighting the same fight that my father and my mother fought for in the movement. And sadly to say, as far as we've come, we're still fighting the same fight. We no longer are marching to that triumphant chorus of, we shall overcome. I sang that song over and over and over again as a child. I laugh and say, but it's probably true, that was probably one of the first songs I ever truly learned to sing, because we were always in the marches. We were always in the rallies. My parents were always dragging us, my siblings and I, around singing "We Shall Overcome." And so now it's been replaced with that angry cadence and rhythm, of a race of people that are crying out, because when there is no justice, there truly is no peace. So America's moral conscience and accountability to a race of people that we are woven into the very fabric of this nation. And it's what continues to fan the flames of systemic racism, which continues to rear its ugly head over and over again in so many parts of our country, as we have all experienced of late. And we're now faced with just a very dangerous resurgence of voices in Washington and across this country that are sowing seeds of division and hate. And Mayor Pete, I know that you are a very religious person, as I am. And according to my faith, to fear or to vilify or to murder anyone is in direct contradiction to the word of God. And for any one of you on the call here that has a deep faith in God, you know that where we are as a nation right now, we are very, very precariously in a situation that I fear that if we don't make the right decisions, if we don't really look towards really a sense of peace and wholeness, and making sure that we have a vision that's inclusive and diverse, I truly believe that the great America that we are, we could very, very easily slip into the great America that was. I want to know, I have challenged a lot of people that are of faith like I am, I want to know who's willing to walk with me. Where's the heart of man when it desecrates our commitment to living as one nation under God? I want to know, what God are people serving? I take a lot of my strength from the book of Genesis, which reads, so God created human beings in his own image. We're all in his own image, male and female. In the image of God, he created them. And my God teaches me that Black lives matter just as much as any other lives matter, and that we're all vulnerable, but that we are worthy. And Black lives too matter, because we're also children of God. Many of you know that I lost my son in a racially motivated shooting to a man who was unable to see the value of the color of my son's skin. And Jordan's dark skin was reason enough for this man to feel that he was empowered to murder with a gun, and believe that he really had the right to do so. So as we've seen, though, that my son's story is unfortunately not unique. We've got to work together to build an America that holds in high regard and respect and for the dignity of all human life. That is who we are, one nation under God. We have dignity and respect for everyone, whether you were brought here against your will or whether you migrated here for a better way. One nation, collectively together, the beautiful mosaic of cultures and ethnicities that represent all of America. That's who we are. And we're called to love the stranger because, as I said, we're all strangers to this land. We're all immigrants here from every corner of the globe. And it's on all of us. All of us are stakeholders, and we've all got to stand together. No one individual person can fix these problems, but we have to collectively come together to create progress through coming together and advocating for change at our federal level, our state level, and local levels. And every one of us, every single one of us is a stakeholder in protecting our rights to live in the fullness and the liberty that's promised to us by our Constitution. So we've got to demand action. Each of us has to take our place and be accountable and expecting accountability from our leadership. And yes, that means even expecting accountability from me as a legislator, as a federal legislator. I implore everyone on this call to remain committed past today, past tomorrow, past this week, and past this month. Stay committed to this fight. Stay committed to electing people that you believe in your values, believe in the sanctity of human life, the preservation of human life, and making sure that democracy works for every one of us in this country, not just for some. And make sure that you're investing in people that you know will uphold the rule of law, that will protect the Constitution and protect democracy, the democracy that we must have to remain a viable and strong and vital country. I know what it is like to commit your life to fighting for a more fair and a more just and more safe country. And I've been doing that since my son died. And I find myself here in the fight for a more fair, more safe country because I want more than anything else in my life to be a mother. Before I had my son, I would dream of the time that my son would spend, going to college, or what he would be or who he would become as an adult. And I spent a lot of time raising him, teaching him these very life lessons, because I know how vitally it is important it is that we make sure that we live the American dream, that we are able to live the way our Constitution says we should be afforded to live. So regardless of whatever positions I hold in my political career, the most important title I will always have in my life is having been Jordan's mother, because I'm translating all of that love and that care and that support that I would still be giving to my child. I'm giving it to the people that I represent. I'm giving it to my community, to my district. I'm giving it to Georgia, and I'm giving it to the entire nation. I continue to fight as much as I possibly can. And still, as a mother, I am still a mother. I just call myself now a mother of many children that I get to represent. But unfortunately, as a lot of women do, I struggled to get pregnant with my son, Jordan. Jordan was a miracle child for me and for his father. And I believe that raising Jordan was the most important purpose in my life. And having Jordan in my life, he was such a caring kid. He really was the greatest teacher that I ever had, and how to really unconditionally give my love and my support and my nurturing. And that's exactly what I'm trying to do right now. I'm just trying to translate that love and that support and that caring into the people that I represent, into America. I actually was a flight attendant for Delta Airlines for 30 years while I was raising Jordan, and I would schedule all of my flights to make sure that I got home every night. And Jordan oftentimes would say, well, Mom, why don't you just go ahead and do a 3-day trip where you can spend the time away overnight? And I'd often joke and laugh and say, no, you're a teenage boy. I'm not doing that. I'll be home every night. But no matter the long hours that I had, I would always leave in the morning and I would come back in the evening so that I could make sure that I was at home teaching and training and providing and caring for my own son. These last 8 years have completely changed my life forever. And I know that what I have been able to accomplish is only because of the support that I've received from people all around the nation and all around the world. If any of you are not familiar with my case, my story, just very briefly, I lost my son November 23rd, 2012, in what the country has called the loud music killing. My son and his friends were simply going shopping from one mall to the next in Jacksonville, Florida. It was Black Friday. Jordan had money his father had given him, and they were going to go shopping and scout out girls at the mall, which boys at that age really do. And within those 3.5 minutes, my son and his friends stopped at a convenient store gas station to get some chewing gum, because my son said, guys, if we're going to pick up girls, you got to have fresh breath. So we need to get chewing gum. In that 3.5 minutes, a man named Michael Dunn, he drives in next to the boys. He parks next to them on the passenger side. And he starts telling them to turn down their thug music, that he couldn't hear himself think. He called the boys gangbangers, called them thugs, and racially profiled them within those 3.5 minutes. Started a verbal altercation with the boys, in particular with my son Jordan, who was simply saying to them, man, we're not bothering you. Just turn your window up. We have a right to play our music. Michael Dunn said to the boys, and Jordan in particular, you can't talk to me that way. And he pulled his 9mm Glock out of his glove box, shot 10 rounds into the car, and ballistics show that 3 of those rounds were directed towards Jordan. Jordan died instantly by those 3 shots out of the 10. Michael Dunn then proceeds to back out of the parking lot. His girlfriend jumps in the car after she comes out of the gas station convenience store. They drive off. They park their car in a hotel, behind the hotel so that no one could see their license plate. They walked their puppy Charlie. They had a couple of stiff drinks. They ordered a pizza and they went to bed. And unbeknownst to them, there was the young homeless couple that were getting gas at the gas station for the car. They saw everything. They wrote down the license plate number. They turned in the license plate number to the convenience store clerk. And the next morning, when Michael Dunn and his girlfriend actually saw that a young Black male had been killed at the gas station, his girlfriend says, "Take me home." They get in their car. They drive 170 miles back to Satellite Beach, Florida. There again, they parked their car in their garage and acted as if nothing happened. But for the grace of God and that young homeless couple in their car as witnesses and having given that information to the convenience store clerk, that is how we apprehended Michael Dunn at home. And Michael Dunn took us 2.5 years in court to get convictions, even with witnesses. It took us 2.5 years to get convictions, but Michael Dunn now is serving life in prison with no parole for the first-degree murder of my son Jordan, plus the attempted murders of the other 3 boys that were in the car. Michael Dunn is serving an additional 90 years, plus an additional 15 years for shooting in an open public space. And it is very, very rare as a national case when there is a white male shooter on Black males and there's convictions on all counts. And people have said to me, thank God you got justice. You got justice for Jordan and the boys. But I will tell you is that there are young men and women of color, in particular men of color, that are dying all over the country in communities that you've never heard of. We don't know their names. We've never seen their faces. And only their loved ones, only the people that know them in their communities know who they are. And so, yes, we received some sense of justice for Jordan and his friends, but justice is not served yet until no one ever has to be afraid of being gunned down in their communities, being gunned down because of who they love, or the color of their skin, or the racial identity, or the religion that they believe in. So I decided that, after the Parkland shooting, I was going to stand up and I was going to run for office because I was tired of listening to the stories on the news and reading about all these beautiful souls that were lost to unnecessary gun violence. And I'd had enough with the Parkland shooting, that tragedy, when I saw all those children the same age as my son when he was murdered, running for their lives out of the school. And I kept waiting for someone to stand up and to really stand up to defend them, to stand up to defend their right to exist without the fear of being gunned down in their own schools. And I decided that I was going to run for the seat because I was tired of not hearing anyone, hearing our clergy, hearing our federal legislators stand up to defend people's right to live without the fear of being gunned down. Before I ran for office, I was the faith and outreach leader for Every Town for Gun Safety and Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America. And I remember all the times that I spoke to the very legislators that are now my colleagues and governors all around the country. And I testified before the United States Senate and our state legislatures, imploring people to put in place gun safety laws that would protect people's ability to live freely without the fear of unnecessary gun violence. And that is the reason why I decided to run for office. I stood up for families just like mine here in Marietta, Georgia, and throughout the country. And I stood up and announced my run for Congress. I told my story all across my district because unfortunately my story is the story of many people across the country. I'm also a 2-time breast cancer survivor. And so I'm very concerned about people like me that have pre-existing conditions. We should be able to afford our treatment and our health care. We should have access to affordable, good quality health care. We should be able to pay for our prescription drugs. So these are reasons why I ran. I was a single mother. And so I understood what it meant to rob Peter at times to pay Paul, to be able to keep food on the table. When I worked for Delta Airlines as a flight attendant for 30 years, when after 9/11, most airlines were furloughing their employees, Delta did not do that, but we took pretty hefty pay cuts. And so I was making about $10,000 a year less. So I understood what it meant to be a single mom and having to take care of my child and keep food on the table and keep them educated and make sure that I could keep my head above water. I understood what it meant for people to have a livable wage. There's no one in this country that can afford to live on $7.25 an hour, nor should they be expected to. I understand how important it is that everyone have access to a good public education. No one should be penalized. No child, no family should be penalized if they cannot afford to give their children a private education. And that's the reason why I sit on the Education and Labor Committee, because I want to make sure that every child is afforded a stellar education, a global education to be able to compete globally, because that's what they will need to do to be successful. So these are the reasons why I ran for office. And I'm so grateful to each and every one of you for listening to my story, listening to my heart. There is so much that I want to accomplish on behalf of the people that I represent. There is so much more to do, but yet there's so much more to undo. Plenty to undo to make sure that democracy is standing here and not dismantled before our very eyes. So I'm working as hard as I can. I will tell you, Republicans want the seat back. My district is an R+8 district. I am the first Democrat to hold this seat since 1979. I hold the seat that was once held by Newt Gingrich. I, most importantly, am the first minority in the history of Georgia to ever hold this seat. But as I said, Republicans want this seat back. They say that I don't represent their values and their ideals. They say that I don't represent the district, and I know what that means. They have been atrocious to me. They have attacked my family. They've attacked my elderly mother-in-law. They have made even my entire family a target, and they are willing to say and do anything to take this seat back. We are the top target of the NRA gun lobby because within the first 40 days of my time in Washington, I was a co-sponsor, one of the lead co-sponsors of federal background checks for all gun sales. Also, HR 1112, closing the Charleston loophole. Same legislation I worked on as a gun safety advocate before I ran for office. And Mayor Pete knows the length our opponents are going to go to bring us down. He has been there. He himself has been the subject of a lot of misinformation and innuendo. And in my race, a local Republican official falsely said that my son had been killed by a drug deal gone bad, that he'd been killed by his drug and gangbanger friends. And they're sending packages to my elderly mother-in-law in Tennessee, claiming that I live in Tennessee. These are the people, and these are the organizations and the people that are supporting my opponent, Karen Handel. Karen Handel is the woman that I took the seat from. Karen Handel is the woman that when she was Secretary of State, a lot of the voter suppression that you see that we suffer by right now, she was the author of a great deal of it. She purged thousands and thousands of people off of our voter rolls. Karen has a very long history in Georgia politics. She is a Georgia architect of voter suppression. And also she has also worked with our governor now, Governor Brian Kemp. The two of them together collaborated to purge thousands and thousands of people off of our voter rolls in 2016. So the stakes could not be higher for us here in Georgia. Everyone has seen the voter suppression that we suffer by. Everyone has seen just the great lengths that the Republican Party and my opponent will go to discredit us. To keep the House, we must keep this seat. And so that's my story. That is why I stood up. And now, Mayor Pete, I would love for you to be able to take some questions, but thank you for hearing my heart.
Well, thank you for what your heart and your mind have brought to Congress, and thanks for the way that you've taken your extraordinary story and turned it into a source of hope and a source of action. I think everybody on the call, if they weren't already, knows now why I'm proud to be in your corner. So, looking forward to whatever questions there are for both of us. And is it Jake gonna play air traffic control?
Yeah, here we go.
All right.
Let's see. We have our first question here. Let's see. We have a first question submitted from Jan. And I believe, Congresswoman, if you'd like to answer first, and then Mayor Pete, if you would, if you have anything to add. The question is, Jan asks, what does it mean to you to build a coalition, a diverse coalition of citizens and even children to join you in ending gun violence and working for more listening, understanding, and empathy, and in shaping a society worth living in?
Well, thank you for that question, Jan. And that's a very unique question. I don't think anyone's ever asked me that question before. But Jan, when my son died, it meant the world to me to see just so many people from so many different backgrounds and races coming to my aid, coming to give me support and helping me to stand up against gun violence. I was truly, truly touched by that because I understand that gun violence affects everyone in the nation. There are no safe spaces for anyone anymore. And I know that, the fights that we have in our communities, the fights that we have to hold these seats, the fights that we have to bring others into the fold to help make sure that democracy works, we cannot win these fights alone. We just really can't. We need every bit of support that we can. We must work together in our communities and bring as many people along with us as we possibly can. And our children, they're at risk every single day. Whether they go to a park or whether they go to the movie theater or they're in school, we understand the dangers of the senseless gun violence and the effects that it has, on our families. But because no family should ever have to go through what I've had to go through, so we do have to work together. We have to work in a sense of urgency, and we have to work with a sense of being deliberate and understanding that this can change, but it will take time and it will take effort. It will not happen overnight. But in order for change to be sustainable, it means that everyone has to feel like a stakeholder and everyone has to jump out of the boat and be willing to help create and stimulate that change.
What a great answer. I can't add much to that because I think that's exactly right. I think more than anything, it's the moral authority of speaking to lived experience. The way you've been willing to take your heartbreak and anguish and turn that into action. And I think also about the moral authority of the young people in, for example, the response to Parkland. I think when any person, even not yet old enough to vote, looks into the eyes of a decision maker in a position of authority and says, what are you doing to keep me safe? That has an effect on any, if you have any humanity in you, that has an arresting effect that makes you think, do not let this young person down. And I think we're seeing this extraordinary coalition come together. Now, that coalition is not reflected, obviously, in Washington. And what we see so much is that there's an extreme agenda that's taken hold. Take that background check legislation that you helped lead the way on. That's something that reflects the will of the American people, the will of most Republicans, the will of most gun owners who know that it is a matter of common sense that there ought to be background checks for everybody, that we have to close the Charleston loophole. And yet, the NRA and the congressional GOP have done everything they can to stand in the way. We know that the American people understand what needs to change. Now our job is to make sure that that's reflected in elected office. And I think that this coalition is growing to the point that no one, even the most hardened corners of the GOP, can ignore that call.
And then let's see, next, we actually have a video question that was submitted.
Right.
From Gavin, and I believe, Mayor Pete, this one is for you, and then Congresswoman, if you'd like to add.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Gavin Reynolds, and my question this evening is for Mayor Buttigieg. So, like you, Mayor Buttigieg, I was born in the great state of Indiana. However, I grew up in the greater state of Georgia. For you, though, I'm curious. As we've seen the state and the region of the South change so much over time, take me back to when you were growing up. What were some of your preconceptions about the state of Georgia and the South more broadly? And how have those ideas changed over time? What gives you the most hope about the South politically?
Gavin, it's nice to see you, and that's a great question. And I'll let your comparison of loyalties to Georgia and Indiana slide just this once. You know, you know, your question, I think, reflects the extent to which we are seeing so much change in the possibilities in so-called red states, and Georgia is changing at an incredible clip. I have to admit that growing up, I think that I had maybe a one-dimensional view of the South. I knew that it was a very conservative place. I knew that there was a very complex and troubled history, especially when it came to racial justice. One of the things I saw in the campaign, though, was how much of the movements and the changes that made America a true democracy played out on the streets in the South. Matter of fact, the last day of my campaign began in Georgia, and started with breakfast with the Carters, and then a few hours later was in Selma with Congressman John Lewis that Congresswoman McBath was mentioning just a moment ago. Two just moral giants from different backgrounds and with very different stories, but who reflected so much about the story of the South between them. Now, two of the only people I've met in politics, for all the very famous and distinguished people that I've met, two of the only ones I've met who I felt like were on just another level of existence. And when John Lewis came out to speak to us in Selma as we were gathered on the Edmund Pettus Bridge, retracing the footsteps that he and others with unbelievable physical courage had taken in the service of civil rights 55 years earlier, you could see that it was really in places like Selma, where there was such resistance to civil rights, that a very important part of the American story was redeemed. Now I think about how much is yet to be redeemed, and I think about that in terms of the potential for change in Georgia, a place that I think is at the forefront of proving what I always love to say on the campaign trail, that there's no such thing as a permanently red state. I think about it in the context of my own home state of Indiana, a place that has produced some of the best and worst in American politics. I've been active on Twitter drawing attention to some incredibly disturbing acts of hate that have happened right here in my home state of Indiana. But I've also seen what people here are capable of. I've seen, even living in where I live right now, a Trump plus 23 district. I have also seen how people mobilized around racial justice. I've seen how people insisted that we invest more equitably in neighborhoods. I've seen how people were ready to vote for something different and something better. And so I love your question, because it suggests the possibility of change. And what gives me the most hope about the South politically is just having been there. And the more time I spend there, the more I see that there can be a different and better story. And of course, Lucy McBath is at the forefront of that. Her election is living proof of the kind of change that can happen. The idea that a seat once held by Newt Gingrich is now held by an extraordinary leader like Lucy McBath. If that doesn't mean there's hope for all of us, I don't know what does.
Let's see. And then we have another question here, another video question. We have a question from Alex, and I believe this is directed at you, Mayor Pete.
Hi, Mayor Pete, and happy Pride. My name is Alex, and I turn 19 next week. I've been reflecting a lot recently on something that I wrote nearly exactly 1 year ago today, on the night before my 18th birthday. At that time, the only time that I'd ever told anyone that I was gay was in a letter that I wrote to you and Chasten. I wondered if it counted as coming out. Maybe they opened it, read it, even replied. I wrote, I'll probably never know. Last August, I got this in the mail. As a queer kid in America, your candidacy changed my life. In that letter, I told you that you gave me hope, and you said that the feeling was mutual. And so my question for you today is, given everything that's going on around us, what gives you hope? In a moment where it's so clear that so much in this country demands change, what parts of America are worth holding on to? What can we do to remind ourselves that it can and will get better? Thank you.
Well, what a touching question, and I'm so glad that my note reached you, and so glad that your letter reached me. And happy Pride to you as well. And I mean it when I say that you speaking up, you summoning the courage, a very different place in your life than I was when I found the ability to step forward in my own. Gives me an enormous amount of hope for the future, and a belief that the possibility of change is with us. You mentioned that there are things we need to preserve and things we need to very much change in this country. And I think above all, what we need to preserve is the self-healing capacity of this country, that even in its moments of falling short most grievously of what this country might be, it's been characterized by this ability to change, I think Stacey Abrams called it the being written into our system, the ability to fix what is broken. And that has made it possible for our country to expand, to include in the circle of citizenship and belonging people who were frankly outside of the founders' own imagination, constrained as those men were in their moral reach and in their, as we've learned and come to focus on more, very mixed moral stories around many of these men. And yet, what came out of that period was something that was bigger than any of them, and therefore bigger than any of us in our own limitations and biases. That gives me hope when I see that people actually step forward in the name of that possibility of change and have a level of trust, even when sometimes our systems or institutions have been less than fully trustworthy. As you must have trusted me and Chasten to reach out to us and share such a personal truth of your own. That level of trust that sometimes is given before it is earned, and then it has to be earned on the back end, is something that I think we're capable of, but only if we really commit ourselves to it. And I've seen how people are trusting one another right now to be part of a movement toward change, and trusting precisely because we know our system isn't quite right in its ability to be changed. That gives me hope. But that adds up to some very concrete things, including the need for all of us to act and mobilize and join together headed into November. And our challenge doesn't end in November, it begins in November, because then we got to go out and make good on all the trust that we are hoping we will persuade voters to place in our phenomenal candidates and in our vision. That's when it really gets demanded. But that good work, I think, will help us get trust and hope cycling in the right direction. And if we can pull that off, then as bleak as things are right now, we'll actually look back with a huge amount of pride in 2020 as the beginning of something redeeming and wonderful in the life of our country.
That's beautiful.
Wow. And then I think we have time for one more question. We have a question here from Gayatri.
Hi, Congresswoman McBath and Mayor Pete. My name is Gayatri, and my question is, how can non-Black minorities like Asians with more privilege fight back against anti-Black racism and be a good ally?
Wow, thank you for that question, Gayatri. I really appreciate it. I think one of the most important things that we can do is, and because we are people of color, we do know what it feels like, what it looks like to be discriminated against. And it's very painful when it happens, whether it be a microaggression or whether it be outright bigotry and racism. And I think the most important thing that we need to understand is that we've got to find a sense of our humanity, who we are, our humanness, and because we're all interconnected and we all have a shared responsibility to one another. We don't exist one without the other. And that means having that shared identity of what each and every one of us have the same needs, the same desires, the same wants. And so it's just a matter of really being able to extend a hand to someone that doesn't look, think, or act like you, and understanding that there's a common thread somewhere. There's some way that we can identify. There's some way that we can relate to one another. There's some way that we can understand our humanity, and to be deliberate in finding that in one another. Be deliberate in finding that in one another. Otherwise, we cannot exist together. We cannot continue to exist together in this climate. We will not be able to exist as a nation in this current climate. It's a matter of just having these hard discussions, sometimes discussions that are very difficult to have because we feel uneasy or we feel unsure about what we don't know about or who we don't know about. But to be deliberate in extending that olive branch, having discussions, opening our homes and organizations and activities, and just really a shared coming together to experience different ideas, ideologies, thought processes with people that don't think, look, or act like we do. Just extending our hands to our neighbors and our communities. Sorry about that. Extending our hand to our neighbors and our communities and just sharing our experiences, our lived experiences, because whether people believe it or not, we all have some of the very same similar experiences. We're all human. And so we all have a role to play in making sure that each and every one of us lives in a community where all of us are on the same level playing field, that we're all able to have good education and good health, access to good health care, and that no one has to be afraid of being gunned down as unnecessarily, that we all are able to have some of the same shared, lived, valuable experiences. But that means that each of us have to be accountable for reaching across the aisle. That means that we have to be unafraid, or even if you are afraid, that's okay. Work through your fears to understand someone that doesn't look like you or act like you or think like you, because that is the only way we will change the dynamics of what's happening in this country. We're far better than where we are right now. We're far better than where we are right now. And each of us has to take responsibility in making sure that this country, this democracy, stands for years and generations to come. But that means that each of us has a place at the table right now, and that we all can offer something. We all can offer something.
Thank you, Congresswoman, and thank you, Mayor Pete, for joining us today. I know we just have a few minutes left for some closing thoughts. Mayor Pete, would you like to go first?
Yeah, first of all, I just want to key off Gayatri's question about allyship, because I think this is a moment where each of us needs to find in our own experience a reserve of compassion and motivation that will help propel us to make ourselves useful to one another who have had different experiences. And it's one of the reasons why the readiness of each of us to share our own story can help others to see how those stories are connected. And again, the way that Lucy McBath does that is one of the reasons I'm so glad that she's in the United States Congress. I think everybody on this call, if you didn't already, sees why this is so important. I just want to let everyone here know, I know that you're getting pinged and bombarded and emailed about all kinds of different important causes. And I know that we're already in an uncertain and demanding and exhausting and confusing time, and yet you're here. And that's a source of great hope. And I continue to believe that we really will look back on this moment. Doesn't feel that way now, but we'll feel good looking back on this moment if this is the moment that we channel all of that into action and send a resounding message like, really hasn't happened in my lifetime, but very much could happen very soon if we get this right. It's why we need to make sure that we send Congresswoman McBath right back into that seat that she's competing for. It's why we need to lift one another up and help each other stay motivated and stay involved. And it's one of the reasons why I'm so proud to be part of this community of supporters that has emerged to make sure that we make this the beginning of a better day for this country. As she said, so much depends on this democracy being here for the years and decades and centuries to come. That's not only important for Americans, it's important for democracy. This is the most consequential democracy to form on Earth in the last 2,000 years. We had better make sure that it is better, as she put it, better than we are today. We can be, and you're part of it. So thanks so much. Honored to be part of this, and delighted in advance for the celebration that we're going to earn come November.
Mayor Pete, thank you so very much. I just cannot tell you how meaningful this event has been for me and for everyone that is on. And we just want to thank you for everything that you continue to do. Thank you so much for investing in America, investing in its people. Really appreciate you for that. And thank you for investing your time and your energy in me and for everyone that's on this event. And the last thing I'd like to leave everyone with is that I know that it might seem dark and it might seem somewhat bleak right now, but really believe that and know that there are a lot of people in the country that are really living as hope dealers. Each and every one of us living and working as hope dealers, because we know that we still are the greatest country in the world. And we have to continue to believe in that, believe in ourselves, and know that a better day really is coming. We have been able to pick ourselves up by our bootstraps before and move forward and make progress. And this is no different. We will do this again, but we need everyone to stand in the gap. So thank you everyone for joining us tonight. I really appreciate you, and continue to move forward, stay healthy, and please stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.